Okay, so state of the city, big topic. We haven't had a lot of time to prepare for this, and certainly can't just break out information today that the board hasn't seen. So, but it occurs to me that stuff can be run repeatedly in the media, and it can be on the front page of the newspaper, and people will still ask me about it. And so hopefully this will be a good summary of some of the things that you've seen and a reminder for the rest of us. I would like to say that with our board, I'm very humbled to have the opportunity to serve in this capacity. I've never really aspired to be a city manager anywhere else but here. Some would say, would argue I didn't even aspire to be one here. But what I really think the conflict is that we've set in motion about a 5 to 7 year cycle historically to where the city managers kind of come and go, kind of like Methodist preacher, and I'm a Baptist, so I like to stay put, okay? So what we'd like to really do is kind of set up an opportunity for folks to understand that there is an opportunity to advance within the organization. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity to do that, and I hope that we can pass that torch one day to other folks. In preparation for the Moody's bond rating and S&P bond rating calls that we had yesterday, we had to do a little soul searching and try to explain to them what's going on in our organization. And so one of the things I wanted to point out is when we look at this talented group of individuals who volunteer to serve as mayor and alderman, I'm amazed at how many people think we can balance the budget by cutting their salaries or taking away their benefits. They don't have benefits. They don't have a car. They don't have a phone. Everything that they do is because they love this community, and we all owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude. I'd like to thank them for that. Some folks forget that the mayor was the commissioner of banking for the state of Tennessee. He's an entrepreneur. I told him one time what we need is more people like you that are going to start and incubate businesses and then move on to the next, because he also has a short attention span. So we also have folks that are involved in real estate, research and development, human resources, corporate communications, medical technology, healthcare, and economic development. I don't think you can look around at any board and not realize the talent that we have available to us. Also, they're all elected at large. Many places that you go, you're elected by district, so all you have to carry is your one little area. They have to carry the whole city. So that means that of the whole city of Kingsport, they were the cream of the crop of the available candidates to serve, and we really appreciate that. So what is the state of the city? Okay, first of all, we've already established that I'm a new city manager, but I'm not new to the organization. Again, this is for that Moody's bond rating call to help them realize there's going to be continuity. I do have almost 30 years of experience with the city of Kingsport. Most don't realize that I started as a planning intern from ETSU. My first project was the Eastman Road zoning study back when they rebuilt Eastman Road, and people look at me now like they rebuilt Eastman Road. It wasn't always that way, but yes, I'm that old. Okay, so I spent times in geographic information systems, development, public works, and also utilities. So I do have a breadth of knowledge for the organization and appreciation for all. I also spent quite a bit of time in annexation, and while that's a controversial topic, it also gave me an opportunity to really appreciate the entire organization from top to bottom and side to side. We have a deep and talented staff, as evidenced by what you've seen introduced here today. There's not a day I come in that I'm not impressed again at what kind of talented staff we have on board. I trust them, I value them, they provide me with brutally honest input every single day, and we make better decisions as a result. And that's really important, that we feel comfortable enough that we can share opposing viewpoints, but as the mayor said, when we walk out of the room, we have a decision made and we stick with it. Two other team members that you were introduced to earlier had all the qualities. They could have been city manager as well. And I appointed them to assistant city managers for operations and administration as a result. We have a very close, collaborative decision-making style. If I didn't learn anything else in Leadership Kingsport, I learned that I am an ENFJ. And as a result, I have a big heart, and if I just use my heart to make decisions, I'll make bad decisions. So I need folks that don't have a heart, Ryan, to help offset my decisions. I told somebody the other day that I said Ryan's my moral compass, because I'll think I have a great decision, and Ryan say, that's great, you'll make that one person happy, you're going to make 39,999 unhappy. So thank you, Ryan, for keeping me honest. John Campbell, our previous city manager, who's in the room, John, chose to retire here. I've never known a city manager to retire and stay here. You don't do that if you don't believe in the community that you have built and that you want to continue to live in. And he continues to contribute, recently being named Vice President of the Economic Development Board for Sullivan County, which is called Networks. So the key messages for 2014-15, and this comes from our capital improvements program, which sets our spending for the year. Fundamentals first: streets, safety, and parks. Amenities to attract growth and investment. Better project planning and cost estimates: measure twice and cut once. Improved project management. Identify true costs by budgeting operating costs to go along with your capital costs. And I know all this sounds really boring, but we've done so many projects here lately, and we've accomplished so much in such a short time. We need to make sure that we can continue that momentum. But in order to do that, we've got to kind of take a breather and make sure that we don't get too far past the comfort zone in our construction practices and live within our means. So we talked about focusing on the fundamentals. When you think about the hierarchy of needs, in psychology, think about the hierarchy of needs of a community. The foundational fundamentals are water, sewer, stormwater, roads, and infrastructure. And some would argue that over the past few years, we've had more attention to the top of the pyramid instead of the bottom of the pyramid. So for a season, we want to focus on the bottom of that pyramid and make sure everything is taken care of. Recently, I was at the International City Managers Conference in Charlotte, and there was a speaker named Peter Kageyama who wrote a book called For the Love of Cities. And I would encourage you to get that book if you're so inclined and take a look at it. And you think, love cities? That doesn't make sense. A city is an inanimate object. But everything that I saw him say is what I've experienced in Kingsport growing up. From a very early age, I've known that Kingsport's a really special place. And I'm reminded by all the volunteers that have contributed so much time and effort over that my lifetime and before to make it so. So what is For the Love of Cities? To be a place that attracts the brightest, most creative talent, a city must do more than fix potholes and have good schools. Now all the public works people and educators in the room can relax a minute. I'm going to get back to you. I hadn't forgot you. When a place evokes an emotion, it's special. Think about Pal's. Is Pal's just an average hamburger? That's heresy to say that in Kingsport, Tennessee, okay? But what's the first thing college students do when they come home? They post on Facebook and Twitter and every avenue of social media. I'm at Pal's. The first place I'm going to go is Pal's. How did Pal's become a place that invoked love? How did a hamburger joint become a place that invoked love? Think about that, and how can we emulate that at a city? Kageyama outlined some of the things that make a city the kind of place where people love to live. Be bike-friendly, walkable, dog-friendly. A city should have signature elements that make people love it. Bays Mountain, the Greenbelt, for example, in our situation. Be playful. Public art can also play a role, as can a farmer's market. So we focused on many of those things. These have been a continuing focus for Kingsport, but now it's time to focus on the fundamentals for a season. And again, I mentioned Ryan earlier as my moral compass. He reminded me that not only is Pal's a place you love and has good food and evokes this emotion, it's also meticulously maintained, paving-wise, and all the other fundamentals. So we got to make sure we take care of that too. So J. Fred Johnson, the father of Kingsport, talked about the Kingsport spirit. He said that if he had to define what created Kingsport, it was a desire for the greater good, for the greater number. And every time I attend a United Way meeting and I hear the dialogue that goes on and I see that goal that's set, I think back to that time and how it's kind of bred into us that we're supposed to give back. Danelle, I did my Meals on Wheels route right before I got here. So I couldn't not do that. That was something I'm supposed to do, so I did that. So let's take a stroll down memory lane for a minute. If you think about it, Kingsport's been fighting an uphill battle since the day it was created. 1917 was World War I, right? So you see, this is downtown Kingsport, Broad Street. You pretty much have a clean slate. My grandmother was born in 1894, and she went to ETSU as the second class to ever go there. And so she's lived with us in her later years, and I said, "Well, tell me about going to ETSU." And she lived in McFeeters Bend, which is Churchill, Hawkins County. She said, "We crossed the river, caught the train in Churchill, we went to Gate City, changed trains, went to Bristol, changed trains, and went to Johnson City." And I said, "Why didn't you go through Kingsport?" She said, "Honey, there wasn't a Kingsport." So everything that you see built was built in one woman's lifetime, one person's lifetime. So we're about to celebrate our centennial, but understand this is still a new experiment kind of in process. In 1920s, the Great Depression era, as we were walking down looking at some of the renovations that are taking place, I found there was a recessed area that's a brick cover, but behind it there's a stone pillar, a sack stone facade and a pillar. And I was with John and Angela Vashon, and I said, do you know what that is? And they said, I do, to you, and we were kind of testing each other. So that was the Bank of Sullivan County. It didn't make it out of the Depression. It's right beside Wallace News, and it's covered up with a brick facade. But think about it. If the city was incorporated in 1917, you opened this whole big banking community, then the Depression came, and then banks some of them didn't come back, okay? So again, fighting an uphill battle. Just before World War II, this is what Kingsport looked like. You can't really tell here, but right at the end of Broad Street with all the circle churches, they didn't look like the church circle today. First Baptist was a Gothic structure. It was kind of shaped like an octagon, and the front door was lined up down Shelby Street. So when they renovated the church back in the 80s, they uncovered some of the upper cathedral of what used to be there before, and I was told that some of the members of the church actually cried because they said it was like opening a time capsule because they saw the church they grew up in that had been covered up for all those years. Just after World War II, you see it starting to fill in a little bit more. 1950s, think about that, cruising, Elvis, and poodle skirts. So you've got all the facades that we're trying to get uncovered right now. You started to see those facades cover up. You saw it become more of an automobile culture. You saw 4 lanes on not Center Street. That doesn't exist anymore, does it? We have 4 lanes on Broad Street. In 2005, think about this, 30 years after the mall, we went back in and started working on Broad Street. And this isn't that far back, but sometimes folks need a little visual reminder about where we've come from. So again, 30 years post-mall, notice this is the Sturkey Lofts, still has the aluminum cover on it. This is right beside Wallace News. That's going to become the Italian Village. Italian Village, Giuseppe's family is developing that. The trees, how small, even in that short time period. So I want to impress upon you that Miles reminds me often that each generation plants acorns that grow into oak trees. So the question is, what are we doing right now that is going to grow into the future? Today, downtown is a vibrant gathering place. Note the sculptures and the facades are now removed. That's a shot from the top of Lamplight Theater of the Downtown Concert Series, and the ever-popular Parklet, which is at Center Street and Broad. These little things don't cost that much, but they make a city lovable, and they cause people to want to come back. And so that's some of the things that we're trying to accomplish. So today, on the eve of the city centennial, this is what downtown Kingsport looks like. This is what Broad Street looks like from Cement Hill. It's a view that many of us don't get very often because Cement Hill is private property and we can't be up there. But you look down Broad Street and you see a much greener, a much cleaner effect than you've ever seen before. And so, again, you talk about inheriting things from one generation to the next. I think we've done a good job with downtown Kingsport. So how's our city changed in geography? It always amazes me when we talk about annexation and people get all defensive about, well, I live in Ridgefields, I was never annexed. Yeah, you were. Yeah, you were. At some point you were. So let's talk about that in a minute. So the original city limits were Eastman Road to Reedy Creek to the river. My uncle happened to be a police officer, and he was in hot pursuit, he told me one time, and they got to Eastman Road where Green Acres Shopping Center and Johnson School is now, and they had to stop because it was outside the city. The guy left the town. So I think about that now and think, really? But yeah, that's true. In 1970, this is what it looked like. We had added Ridgefields, Allendale, Bays Cove, Skyland, and Preston Woods. In 1980, we had added Rotherwood Estates, Bays Mountain, and Preston Forest. By 1990, we added Lynn Garden, Cooks Valley, Westview, and the interstate areas. And then by 2000, we added Crown Colony, Willowbrook, and Bailey Ranch out Sullivan Gardens Parkway. And today, we've added Rock Springs, Colonial Heights, and Old Island. If you look at each person sitting at this table, with the exception of Lottie, if you look at each person sitting at this table, none of them live in the original city. Your elected officials come from annexed areas. So it always, when people threaten to say, if you annex me, I'm going to run for office, that's what we want. We want to make a better city. We want you to participate. We want to work together to make this a better place to live. So sometimes that's a geography annexation geek, a little extra there for you to think about. So population is constantly changing. It's the net of births, deaths, in-migration, and out-migration. So it gets me when people say, what's the population in Kingsport? And I says, well, it depends. Do you want the Census Bureau? Do you want the state certified? But it's always changing. So the question is it changing in a positive way? We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Deaths exceed births in most counties within a 50-mile radius of here, okay? Deaths exceed births within a 50-mile radius in the counties in 5 states. So natural population in this whole region in several states is declining naturally, okay? That doesn't sound very Chamber of Commerce, does it? But that's true. Okay, in-migration becomes critically important to sustain and grow your economy. So you have got to have people coming in from the outside to shore up your economy and continue to grow, because you're not going to grow naturally in this current environment. So unlike places where rapid growth is creating capacity issues, it always interests me when I pick up the Tennessee Town and City newspaper and they are threatening a moratorium in Franklin, or they have to build new school facilities in other places in Middle Tennessee because they can't accommodate the growth. We have 50% excess capacity in water and sewer, and our roads have excess capacity. We have great infrastructure to accommodate any kind of growth that you want to send our way. So we can handle that. Out-of-state metros relocating to Kingsport. When you come in and turn on your water, we know where you came from. When you leave, we know where your last water bill was sent to. So we know who's coming and who's going. So as we track that data, I think it's interesting to point out that when you look at that map of the United States, the blue is the fewest and the red is the highest. You see that people from all over the U.S. have moved here since 2007. That's why in-migration is so important. When you look at that map, you see it's evenly distributed between L.A., Phoenix, Houston, Dallas, all of Florida, Atlanta, the Carolinas, Washington, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Chicago. So you see that if you do come here, it's not a bunch of people that just have always lived here. It's a bunch of people who have moved here for a reason, that they like living here, and they are very likely to find people similar to them that are already living here as well. So when you look at Tampa, St. Pete's, our top metro, followed by D.C., then Atlanta, and you look at that list, and you have a copy of it, you see it's a very well-rounded number. I found it interesting that Asheville was one of our top donor cities. So you have a net of 772 families, and that's not a huge number, obviously, but you have to multiply that by 2.3 to get the population. And so that's a net gain of 1,775 residents that came in from the outside. And that's important because, again, you have to shore up that natural decline based on population birth rate. Of the 20 states, the top 20 states moving here from 2007 to 2014, obviously Virginia, it's really close. That's probably not even fair to put it on there. But Florida has been the top non-adjoining state since we started keeping statistics. So Florida has been a continual donor state for us. And then as you look at that list, you have some of the usual cast of characters that are nearby, but look at California, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Arizona, for example, are in our top 20. And so again, you see a much broader diversity than perhaps you might expect otherwise. Residential relocation, 2007, 2014, just look at some quick trends. Out-of-state relocations are on an upward trend. Moved to Kingsport from less than 35 miles in northeast Tennessee, and so that would be basically from Greenville to Abingdon, that general area is on a positive trend. Moved into new construction is a negative trend, and that is something when you hear us talk about housing, that's why we talk about housing. I know there's a lot of national things that we can't change, but one of the issues that we have is we have more demand than we have supply when it comes to housing right now. Moved into existing structures. That's obviously, if you can't move into new construction, you're moving into existing structures, and so they're spending a lot of money renovating those structures and upgrading and upfitting them as we speak. Local sales tax collections from 2007 to 2014. Again, when you look at people moving here, each person that moves to a community, according to the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, generates $25,000 a year in annual consumption. And that's just doing regular stuff like going to the barber, the beauty shop, the pharmacy, the grocery store. And so it has a bearing on your sales tax. So if you are having a positive trend in your population, you're going to have a positive trend in your sales tax, and that's what's happened here in Kingsport. This is the year-to-date from July through September, and you can see it continues on compared to the previous years, so we have seen a positive trend in that as well. Downtown Kingsport has seen a renaissance, $145.7 million in total value downtown, $72.5 million in private taxable investments from 1998 till present. That does not count non-taxable investments, which would be the $129 million that were spent on churches, the hospital, and also the higher education facility. So that doesn't count in that number. So I want to make sure you know we're not trying to inflate the numbers by talking about that. So let's see what the numbers say about our city and how it's changed in the past 25 years. I thought it was a really profound statement a few years ago when Keith Wilson, who was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, said that a community's progress should be measured in quarter centuries, not quarters. Because every quarter or month we're waiting on another report from Steb Hipple, to come out from ETSU. How do we do? But the real thing is you have to step back and kind of see how are we doing over 25 years. So we have a subscription to a software service that allows us to look at any kind of polygon you can think about. So in this case, this is a 20-minute drive time from downtown Kingsport. I always find it fascinating when people say, well, what's the population of Sullivan County? What's the population of Hawkins County? What's the population of Scott County, Virginia? What's the population of Washington County, Tennessee? Well, the real answer is that there are bits and pieces of all those counties that are within 20 minutes of us. So if I tell you Sullivan County's population, it's not going to be as relevant. So that using this 20-minute number, I can give you more relevant data that shows you what's happening. Let me quickly just show you. That goes to Gate City on the top, Church Hill on the west, Eastern Star in gray on the south, and then Indian Springs and Fall Creek on the east. So in that 20-minute area, which I'll call the Kingsport market, you see the population trend line is going up. It was 97,750 in 1990, and it goes up to 109,000 in 2017. That's the projection. Okay, so the city of Kingsport went from 45,367, projected to go to 47,891, but with annexation, it actually went up to 51,264. So we are currently in the process now. Just to give you an idea, tonight, for example, we're doing phase 1 and phase 2 of Colonial Heights sewers. So when we annex something, it comes with budgetary ramifications that get included, and then we'll be in there. We're finishing up Rock Springs right now, so we annex, and within 5 years later, we provide water upgrades, fire hydrants, sewer, and so forth. So there is a cost associated with that, and that cost is kind of moving through the system right now. This is a tool that the Census Bureau uses, and you can really look up any community in the country if you wanted to. And what this means is called Flow Mapper, inflow outflow analysis. So there are 11,979 people that leave Kingsport to go work somewhere else every day. There are 29,034 that come into Kingsport from somewhere else to work every day. And there are 8,409 that both live and work in Kingsport. Okay, so obviously, from our point of view, we'd like more people living here that actually work here. We know it's a great place to work, but it's also a great place to live. So you'll hear us talk a lot about Kingsport as a place to live as a result. When you look at this inflow-outflow analysis and you compare it to other places, we picked some benchmark cities just to kind of give you an idea. So like in Chattanooga, they have 24.9% that both live and work in Chattanooga. In Knoxville, 20.3%, Asheville, 19.9%, and then you see Kingsport and Johnson City here at 17.8% and 16.9%, and then Bristol, Tennessee, and Virginia at 15.1% and 13.9%. And just to kind of show you how it would look if you were almost totally a donor community, Mount Carmel down here has 0.7% that actually live and work in Mount Carmel. Obviously, most of them are going to work here. So that kind of gives you an idea of how those stats work. The daytime population of Kingsport is 70,799 people as a result. Talking about who left, who's here, and who stays in place in that combination. In Johnson City, that's 87,481. In Bristol, that's 31,639 is the daytime population there, just to give you an idea of how that works. Now, population growth, and there's going to be zoomed in versions of this, so don't panic on me here. We looked at cities from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, all the way down to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and every place in between to kind of say what's too hot, what's too cold, what's just right when it comes to growth trends. So zooming in on that, when you look at Murfreesboro, in 1990 they had 93,422 people. In 2009 they had 138,000, and this is that same 20-minute drive time. So I'm not comparing political boundaries. I'm comparing actual apples to apples comparisons to what I showed you before. So today, or by 2017, they're projected to be 223,000 people in Murfreesboro. Okay, so one of the ways I used to make an impression on this to folks who maybe haven't traveled there in a while is how many new high schools have been built in Middle Tennessee in the past few years. Now you're familiar with them, but when I used to start talking about this, people never heard of Independence or Ravenwood or Siegel or all these, and Blackman, all these different schools that have been built. And I was at a wrestling tournament down there one time, and my kid was the only one that was from this area. And one of the parents from Pope John Paul in Nashville leaned over to me and he said, "Hey, where are you from?" I said, "We're from Northeast Tennessee." He said, "Has Dobbins been at a private school?" I said, "No, it's a public school." And he said, "Oh, well, we don't send our kids to public schools in Nashville." And I was like, "Oh, well, really? Tell me why." And he said, "Well, you know, it's just kind of suspect, the kind of education you're going to get and all this." And I'm like, "Well, that's interesting. And we don't really have private schools in our area." And I said, "Tell me about a day in your life." He says, "I work in Brentwood. My kid goes to school in Hendersonville, and we live in Donaldson." And I said, "How do you have any quality time together?" And he said, "Well, to come to think of it, we pass on the weekends. It's about the only time we see each other." And I said, "Well, what do you do for a living?" He said, "I build public high schools." I said, "Oh, okay, so you came here from Florida to build public high schools, but you won't let your kid go there." So we have not had that kind of experience here. We don't have that kind of stress on our facilities. We have ample facilities between the city and the county to accommodate all of our future needs in terms of just basic space. When you look at Kingsport, 11.5% is the growth rate. Johnson City, 28.4%. Then you see Spartanburg, Columbus, Indiana, Charlottesville, Chapel Hill, Crossville, Tennessee. I put Crossville, Tennessee in there because a lot of folks think that retiree recruitment can't be a positive strategy, but look what it's done for Crossville, just to give you an idea. And then you look at the bottom half of the group and say Youngstown, Ohio, of course, has shrunk 14.3%. Pittsburgh has shrunk 13.1%. So obviously that's the too cold section. And then you got Kingsport's kind of right in the middle. So we could stand a lot more growth and still be fine. There's no problem with that at all. But right now we're in that real middle ground that we need to start turning the number up a little bit. Educational attainment, several years ago we talked about we established the downtown academic village, and we've been struggling with finding ways to measure the metrics. And what we found by using this software is that we can track what's happened in the market area and then what's happened also in the city itself. And as you can see, it's all on a positive trend. The market increased faster than the city. 3.3% of the market increased in associate's degrees, increased in bachelor's degrees, and increased in graduate degrees. So, you know, how do you attribute that? I don't know exactly, but we have more facilities, we have more programs to help encourage people to get their degree. Educational attainment similarly has gone up in the same area. Excuse me. Income has gone up as well. So obviously, if educational income goes up, educational attainment goes up, also income goes up. The current median income for Kingsport is $64,000. The current for the market area is $66,000. So it goes to again show that we have a lot of folks that are living just outside the city that aren't in the city. We have a very polarized population inside the city. We have a very higher income class, and we have a higher lower income group that lives in the city. We don't have that middle class. And so when you hear us talk about trying to get that middle class in, that's what we're talking about. So who lives in Kingsport, who's relocating here? You can't see it, but right in this bottom right corner, we subscribe to a service that's monitored by Experian, and it kind of puts everybody in a 71 mosaic slice group, and it kind of tells you what their buying habits are, what their reading habits are, what their consumption habits are, how many times they go to the theater. I mean, all different kinds of information. And everybody in this room and everybody in America fits into one of those categories. So when you look at those 71 slices, these are the top slices that currently live in Kingsport. Now, I want you to just look at those faces for a minute and think to yourself, when I go out to a restaurant, is this what I see? And I've thought about that a lot, and I think that's pretty accurate. It is pretty accurate as to what we see in our restaurants. Who's moving to Kingsport from greater than 35 miles away? Looks pretty similar, right? Who's moving to Kingsport from less than 35 miles away? Again, looks pretty similar. What's the difference? The difference in the folks moving from greater than 35 miles away, you see more younger faces. You see, this is called sports utility families. You have single middle-aged female with animals. And so you kind of get an idea who's moving here, okay? Who's moving here from less than 35 miles away? This is called digital dependence. So we're seeing more young professionals. If you don't know about PEAK, the Young Professionals Movement in Kingsport, they just gave a presentation last night at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. They have 205 members. They told us they're the largest young professionals organization east of Nashville now. They're bigger than Asheville's as well. So a lot of folks don't think they're young professionals in Kingsport. They are. So get involved with that group. So here's our issue. When you look at what America looks like now, this is more what America looks like. When you look at what we look like, it's very different. And so we're constantly having to explain to potential employees that we are a place that welcomes diversity, that this is a place where you can thrive. And it's been a challenge for a long time, but it's something that we need to continue to be sensitive to and make sure that as our employers are bringing folks in to consider working here, that they can feel comfortable here, and hopefully we can change some of these those numbers. Demographic summary, population, the market grew by 11.5%, the city grew by 5.6%, annexation caused us to grow by 15.5%, so that's why we're taking a little bit of a financial breather to calm down and kind of get through this. 30,000 commuters flow into Kingsport each day for work, 12,000 Kingsport residents leave to go elsewhere to work. Kingsport grew faster than Roanoke, Chattanooga, or Charleston, South Carolina. That's that 20-minute drive time. I know you may not believe that, but I can show you that if you need to be convinced. Kingsport grew slower than Asheville and Hendersonville, North Carolina, and Greenville and Spartanburg, South Carolina. So we continue to be sensitized to the fact that we have a lot in common with our neighbors in upstate South Carolina, western North Carolina, Roanoke area of southwestern Virginia, and then, of course, East Tennessee. Also, educational attainment, city has more degreed residents than the market. Associate's degrees increased, bachelor's degrees increased, graduate degrees increased. Market median income is 11.2% higher than the city. That's the area in the 20-minute drive time just outside the city. The market median income grew 99%, so it almost doubled. The city median income grew 103%, so more than doubled during that same time period. Employment in 1990, manufacturing was 34.2% of our workforce. In 1990, top two employment sectors constituted 55.8% of our workforce. Today, that 5 of those 10 employment sectors are in double digits. So we are much more balanced when it comes to our employment group. This is my reminder to shut up. There you go. Regional unemployment is consistently among the lowest in Tennessee, especially during downturns. Of the top segments moving from greater than 35 miles away, 39.1% are retirees or pre-retirees, 12.8% are families, 5.3% are single family or single parents. Then we have young singles. Of the top 10 segments moving from less than 35 miles away, that would be Tri-Cities Metro, 51.3% are retirees. Then you see single parents, young singles, and families. So again, retirees and pre-retirees, whether we like it or not, are a big part of our growth strategy here. And so whether we need to recruit and promote it is debatable, but it is happening. And it's not just happening in Kingsport, it's happening in Johnson City and Bristol as well. Executive summary on the CIP. We actually decreased by 19% what we're going to borrow this year. We are postponing a few things just to try to give ourselves a little bit of a breather. We do have the debt roll-off, plus we have the Eastman Project Inspire, what we call the capitalized interest. When Eastman committed to do their work here, they also generated a very large sum of unexpected revenue. And so as a result, we're trying to do some of the things that they've requested us to take a look at to help them continue to be successful here in the corporate headquarters. When you look at this year's group, I told you earlier, streets, parks, and safety. So you can see that's what we're focusing on this year. This causes a lot of concern for people because we're looking at 8% in education this year. But it's more important to look at 10 years to kind of give you a trend line for what we're doing. So when you look at the 10-year history, education is 10%. And then you have John Adams Elementary at 10%. That does not include the stadium at 4%. So the top things that we spent money on is streets over 10 years. If you haven't been around town lately, many of the long-standing roads that had been left undone forever, Cooks Valley Road, Cleek Road, Gibson Mill Road, have all been rebuilt. And that comes with a price, and that we've made a lot of progress in that situation. When you look at the budget, there's a Bible verse that says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So what are our community's priorities when it comes to financing our operating budget? And I will remind you that schools get 19% of our operating budget every year. That is, $13.6 million is our part. The total city budget is $72.5 million. The total schools budget is $73.7 million. So the schools budget is actually bigger than the city's budget. So we do our part. We're very generous with our schools. And so therefore, I think based on that statement, we can clearly say that education is our top priority based on what we have put our money toward. Now, close second is police, followed by public works, and fire and medical in that order. So other highlights for 2014, we had 600 building permits issued. Residential is on the increase as well. Residential development grew by 10% with 87 new single-family permits. Private redevelopment continues on Stone Drive, and I'd like to point out that everybody seems to assume that we have incented all this to happen. We did not incent it to happen. In fact, we told Longhorn, they called and said, can we get an incentive? We said, I'm sorry, you're on the wrong side of the street. The redevelopment district's on the other side of the street. They said, well, can you change it? We said, no, we can't change it, I'm sorry. When I hung up the phone, I was convinced we were losing Longhorn, but you saw that it's there now. Next to that, you see hotels being torn down. We've not provided incentives for that. You've seen Cookout and Krispy Kreme, and I could go on and on. We've not provided any incentives for those. They have all happened naturally. Eastman posted the largest single building permit in the city's history. Eastman also pulled 3 additional permits totaling $1.89 million for new industrial capacity. Diversification continues. We used to have one taxpayer, which I guess you can guess who that is, that was 40% of our total property tax base. It's now down to 25.3% of our total tax base. So we are much more diversified, and we did get a better bond rating a few years ago as a result because we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. Other highlights, permits were written for commercial renovations. Largest single renovation was the National Healthcare at 2300 Pavilion Drive on the Indian Path campus. NerdWallet ranked Kingsport as a top city on the rise in Tennessee, even ranked it ahead of Franklin, based on some statistic that they track. And Credit Donkey just recently named Kingsport the best city to retire in Tennessee, as did Bristol and Johnson City. So of the top 10, 3 of them were in this area. So. And then finally, the Northeast Tennessee Association of Realtors pointed out that Kingsport home sales were up by 18.4%. So the average sales price has also gone up, and so we're continuing to see positive momentum in our housing market, which is long overdue and much appreciated. I'm going to skip through some of this. Heritage Glass acquired and opened the AGC plant. They're going to get that started up pretty soon. Major gas line project has brought 200 temporary workers in with $1.3 million in monthly payroll. And then during the next 7 years, Eastman will continue to invest in their Project Inspire, which is a major investment. So I'm going to pause for a minute and let you absorb all this stuff. Goodness gracious. I'm sorry they're so written down, but it's so you can actually look at it a little bit later. So the state of the city is that as of September 23rd, 2014, we're currently ranked the #1 city on the rise in Tennessee, so I hope we can certainly keep that. And thank you so much for having me, and we'll be happy to answer questions.